that you talk about Euclidean geometry in the system, and I have some counterintuitions from a few counterexamples. First is that from Professor John Schneider gives an example of the hamsters eats their babies. And he explains that why the hamster eats their babies is because sometimes we take their cages and say, okay, this one's a little cutie, and then we put it back. When they put it back, the cage is not in the exact same orientation it was before, and which is not happening to us. We never feel that the lecture theater or rotate or something, so that the hamster actually lost its orientation and take its baby as something something as an alien, so that it might attack me, and I should attack it back or something. And so that, but we notice that when we put back the cage, or whichever orientation it is, it doesn't change the Euclidean structure of the cage. And also another example comes from Russian researcher Alexei Sosinsky, and she I don't know whether he or she do a research on some blind people who regain their eyesight, and he finds it is interesting that these people seems to be more care about the topology of the shape rather than the Euclidean shape of it. For example, these people see no difference between a circle and a square, but you can immediately find out a circle, and a circle is if you punch a hole in a circle, they will immediately detect it. So that and a lot of blind people say that because we are blind, so there is no inside or outside, so we can describe something quite well. We have a good intuition, but we cannot imagine it. So does that mean that we have different system for the perceptual system, for the visual system, and maybe the two different systems for two different senses?
Great. Thank you for those questions. Let me take them one at a time. First of all, in the studies that Cheng and Gallistel ran on the rats, and there have been similar studies on other rodents. I can't remember whether there have been any on hamsters, but certainly on other species, making it very likely that this would apply to hamsters. What's crucial is the cage stays still and the animal is disoriented. If you run the study differently, the animal stays oriented and the cage moves, you have a very different situation, because the situation for representing the shape of the layout is not the only, I should have emphasized this, it's not the only system that animals have for navigating. We also have systems for using internal vestibular and other kinds of proprioceptive information to keep track of where we are, so that when the environment moves and we stay still, under many circumstances we can detect that. So actually, if you ran that study on a young child, and studies similar to that have been run on young children, you'll find that they'll behave like the hamsters. They will not reorient themselves in a room where they know where they are. They have not been spun around, and it's the room that's moved. So that engages an interestingly different system. On the question, though, staying with your first point, of whether the behavior of the hamsters accords with our intuitions as adults about what we would do, emphatically it does not. Our intuitions as adults about how we get around in space are very, very different, and I think they're different for two reasons. One is that the system that we share with other animals is really impenetrable. We don't reflect on it. We're not aware of, we're using it all the time, but we're not aware of the fact that we're using it. But the second reason why our intuitions are different is we've gone beyond this system. We have constructed other ways of getting around in space that the hamsters don't have, but neither do the young children. So this is really, I think, a difference between adults and children within our species, not directly reflective of a difference between species. Now, on your second point, about the blind, I've got two things to say. One is that there's beautiful new research on this. It's being conducted by a group of people. The key person is Pavan Sinha at MIT. He's been going to India. He's been part of a humanitarian project where they're doing cataract surgery and other kinds of surgery on people who've been profoundly impaired in their vision. Some so impaired that they have essentially no pattern vision all their lives, and then they get this surgery. Now they can see for the first time, and you can ask, can they distinguish a circle from a square? Okay, and the research is really interesting. It suggests there isn't a single yes/no answer to that question. There are some form analysis abilities that you see immediately, as early as you can test these people once their vision is restored. In particular, they have very good abilities to use patterns of motion to segment visual arrays, and interestingly, those are abilities we also see in human infants. And then there are other abilities that seem to require experience to develop, but they develop rapidly enough that the experience is probably not a slow, protracted, trial and error learning kind of experience. There's probably something else going on. But this is a very active field of study now and a really good one to look at, I think, to be addressing some of these questions. So thanks for bringing them up.
Thank you. And sorry, I have another question for Professor Singh, which is, you just now talk about the different tones of in the Chinese affecting the children's learning. Well, I also have some counterintuition, sorry, because let's say, I learned a bit of linguistics. On the linguistics shows that Chinese have different dialects, and all these different dialects use different tones for the same word. They are different across the dialects, but they are congruent inside the dialects. For example, when we say Beijing in Putonghua, also if we shift to Tianjin, we say Beijing. If we shift to Henan, we say Beijing. So the tone is every different. But I noticed that for toddlers of the 5 to 6 years old, they can very quickly adapt to this kind of things. In China, we have a lot of folk artists speaking dialects. For example, Feng Gong is speaking Tianjin dialect. Guo Da speaking Shanxi dialect, and Zhao Benshan speaking Shenyang dialect. All these dialects are quite different when you firstly hear them, but the toddlers are very quickly in adapting and imitating them. So So I want to ask is that do you think that it is the tone itself is more important, or the semantic and programmatic structure of the language itself is more important for this?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So there seems to be evidence that tone discrimination abilities generalize across languages. So for example, infants who are learning Mandarin Chinese attune or get accustomed to Thai tones as relevant, even though they've never heard Thai, and that Thai is not relevant for them. And the Thai tone inventory is quite different to the Mandarin tone inventory. It's much more dense. So it doesn't map reliably onto what they're hearing, but what seems to transfer is their sensitivity to tone as a relevant feature of words. And there's also some evidence that tone perception or tone discrimination generalizes to musical abilities as well. So it may be much more fundamental and not specific to speech. And then there have been some recent arguments about there being genetic variants associated with lexical tone, and that's why, and these sort of haplogroups of individuals who have these genetic variants, and that may contribute to tone as a feature, as such a widespread feature of human language.
Okay, thank you.
Time, so we have time for just one more brief question.
A very brief question. When you test, there's a chamber where you have the 3 walls, and you put the infant inside. How do you isolate whether there's any effects from the parent?
From the, sorry?
From the parent holding the child.
Oh,
Yeah.
Good question. For most of these studies, we actually don't use parents holding the child.
No, sorry.
Did I
meant Prof.
misunderstand?
Singh.
Sorry?
Prof. Singh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry. The infant.
What? Oh, talking to you.
Sorry about it.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So that was just a demonstration, actually, with a friend with his child. But normally we have the parent listening to masking music that's loud on headphones that cancel out a certain amount of ambient noise. It's very important that the parent not hear the stimuli because even changes, for example, in their heart rate can be felt by the infant and could potentially influence results. So the sound presentation is always masked for the parent.
Right, thank you.
Can I ask a quick question to you, just to finish, keep you from the break for one more second? The early bilingualism effects are fascinating, but I wonder to what degree they might also be correlated with other forms of biculturalism, and whether you think it might be that it's not just the language experience, but also the social and cultural experience of those infants that could be different. And I also wonder whether within the Gusto project, you might get evidence that addresses this possibility by looking not just at the environment that the infant is in, but what they're picking up on from that environment, and whether that what they might be picking up either about their language or about other aspects of their culture could be predictive of some of these differences that you showed us.
Yeah, no, it's very hard to disentangle language and culture. So we have some basic demographic information like economic status, daycare arrangements don't seem to change, but there may be things that are built into their environment that confound language and culture. So yeah, no, we should absolutely look into that. Thank you.
I guess that will conclude our question and answer session. I'd like to thank the speakers again and thank the audience for their questions.
So we have come to the end of our early child development and learning session of CogSci Connect 2013 Singapore. We would now like to invite everyone to level 2 for some light refreshments.